Okay, I'd like to start the Safety Committee on March 24th, 2026 in the caucus room at 7 o'clock p.m. Present are committee members Limpert and Madden, Council President Broussard, Council members Carr, Gilchrist, Mari, Scarl. Also we have the Mayor, Law, is the law director? Not yet. Mayor, Finance Director hiding behind me. Okay. HR Director, Service Director, Wastewater Treatment Plant Supervisor, Director Extraordinaire, and the Chief of Staff, and guests. Here's Law Director is here as well. And guests on the agenda are two liquor permits. The first one, liquor permit number 06951149-1, which is pizza, Danny Boys. And this is going to be a transfer to Pizza North LLC, Danny Boys Craft Pizza and Spirits. And we received no concerns from safety director or the police regarding this liquor permit. Any additional comments, Mayor?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
At this time, I'd like to, any questions from council? At this time, I'd like to make a motion to not object to permit number 06951449-1, Pizza North LLC, 24129 Lorraine Road, and ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 2-0. Second liquor permit is liquor permit number 1001439-3, which is Scramblers, and this is moving from Adept 2 LLC Scramblers at 26435 Great Northern Shopping Center to Adept 3 LLC Scramblers at 26435 Great Northern Shopping Center. No concerns from the police or safety director related to this. Mayor, did you have any comments on this?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Questions from committee or council? Okay, at this time, I'd like to make a motion to not object to permit number 1001439-3 and Adept 3 LLC Scramblers at 26435 Great Northern Shopping Center. Ask for a second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes 2-0. And this is a record for me. I will conclude my shortest meeting ever at 7:03 p.m.
15 years.
Call to order the Finance Committee meeting at 7:05 p.m. on March 24th, 2026. In attendance, Council President Broussard, Councilwoman Carr, Councilwoman Gilchrist, Committee Member Limpert, Councilman Madden, Committee Member Mari, Committee Member Scarl, the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, HR Director, Economic, Service Director, and Chief of Staff and guest. On tonight's finance agenda is 5 ordinances. 3 are for renewal, 2 are new. They are ordinance 2026-26, Recreation Parks Note, ordinance 2026-27, Fire Station Note, ordinance 2026-28, Energy Conservation Note, ordinance 2026-29, Spruce Stormwater Note, and ordinance 2026-30, Lorraine Road Resurfacing Note. Mayor, who will be speaking on behalf of that?
The Finance Director, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman, so just overall, there's 5 notes in total, 3 of which, the energy conservation, fire station, and parks, are all re-renewing the notes. We'll pay off our current notes and then reissue bond anticipation notes, and those are in length of 1 year. We'll actually end up renewing $200,000 less in energy conservation than what we currently have, so it's essentially a pay down. The 2 additional notes is one for $2.885 million for Lorraine Road, and for $2,040,000 for Spruce. Spruce, we're anticipating some grant funds to offset that total. The notes are not to exceed, so what we would essentially do is borrow the full amount, and then we would put any grant funds into our debt service to potentially pay some of these notes down quicker. And then the total notes come out to $15,100,000, which, to my understanding, we're hitting a threshold that we might have more interested buyers of the notes, so hopefully we get a better interest rate because of that. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Since you've been upfront with this for a few weeks now, I don't have any questions. I'm good. How about from committee?
No, it sounds like we're right on with what we had
Okay.
noted
How
before.
about from council? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the 5 ordinances, 2026, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30, and ask for a second.
Second.
Duly seconded by Councilman Lippert. All in favor?
Aye.
Vote passes 3-0, and the Finance Committee concludes at 7:08. Thank you.
Started for March 24th at 7:10 p.m. Present are committee members Mari, Madden, and Lippert, Council President Broussard, Councilwoman Carr, Councilman Scarl, and Councilwoman Gilchrist. The mayor, directors of law, finance, HR, service, the chief of staff, and we have a lot of guests tonight. On the agenda is resolution 2026-7. A resolution approving and authorizing the mayor to enter into a joint economic development district, JED, contract by and between the Township of Olmsted and the City of North Olmsted, Cuyahoga County, Ohio. Mayor, if you'd like to, or who'd you like to have speak tonight?
Mr. Chairman, well, I'll just generally start by saying, the JED, as I described at the public hearing that council was at a few weeks ago, is a special purpose district that is created by a contract between a municipality and a township, and the purpose of it is to encourage economic development. The Ohio General Assembly allowed for JEDs through legislation back in 1993. So I guess technically speaking, they're still somewhat new, but also I would say fairly widely used throughout the state now. This particular JED is concerning the Olmsted Town Center development, which is at the corner of Bagley and Stearns in Olmsted Township. The total projected real estate development costs of the project are currently estimated at over $16 million. And the township is here, so if I get some of these numbers wrong, please, please let me know. It includes a new gas station, a McDonald's, an Aldi grocery store, and 56 residential units as well. As I described at the public hearing, the residents living within the JED district would not be eligible for the income tax credit that North Olmsted residents are eligible for. The best projections that we have now indicate that the city would receive about $23,000 of income tax revenue from the residential units. And with respect to the income taxes on the employees, the estimated total payroll is over $4 million, which results in a projected income tax revenue to North Olmsted of approximately $24,000. And the revenue projections referenced above represent 25% of the income tax revenue generated within this district. Olmsted Township would receive 75% of the income tax revenue. And in consideration, the revenue share agreement is that our city would only bear a 25% burden of the risk associated with the creation of this district and or the ongoing liabilities associated with the ongoing operation of the district. I know that certain members of council had reached out with a concern regarding tying this development into our wastewater treatment plant. Our superintendent of the plant, Brian Blum, is here to answer any of those questions that council members may have. But just generally speaking, to that question, that sewer service area is mandated by the federal government as to who takes that we-water, and it's mandated for us to take it. So regardless if a JED district is created or not created, we take that flow, and if there needs to be an adjustment to that, our superintendent is watching over that, and then would obviously negotiate with the township as to if there needs to be an upgrade of some type of infrastructure there. But I just wanted to make sure that council understood that a JED does not have anything to do with any type of infrastructure that our city would need to share with the township. And I'd just like to just conclude these remarks by just saying that you know, when the township had originally approached us, when Councilman Glassburn was a member of this body and had brought up the idea, gosh, it's been about almost 2 years ago now. The thought surrounding these JEDs is to increase economic development. And we, in today's day and age, 2026, we do not live in a silo. There is a direct benefit to the city of North Olmsted for all of our neighbors to do well. I want Olmsted Township to do well, because that means that North Olmsted will be doing well. We want our neighbors all around us to increase their economic activity, because then that means that there is a spillover effect that will absolutely positively affect our city. And this is a great opportunity, I think, to do something with a neighbor. We successfully do many things together, not only with our wastewater treatment plant, but obviously very recently with our expanded dispatch services, and so many of the other opportunities that we have to use the expertise that we have here in our city to help the township with their safety service vehicles, or any other type of partnership that you can think of. I just think that this is an extension of that, and I hope that council would consider this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I had some questions in general, and if these can be answered, that's fine, but I have a question for the township. How far along are the agreements with Aldi's, McDonald's, and are those pretty solid, or are those still in early phases?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I could answer that. So the Sheets has not yet applied for a building permit. They've been through all of the zoning, so they're ready to go. Aldi has received their building permit. All the improvement plans for the site have been approved by Cuyahoga County, and McDonald's is currently in plan review. There's also another building that we don't know the end user yet, but I think the developer has secured a lease with them. We're just waiting for more information.
And what about the housing development?
So the project is broken into two phases. The first phase is the commercial aspect, and then the second phase, which has not gone through our full zoning approval yet, is as the mayor mentioned, the 56 residential units. So that's still preliminary.
Okay, thank you. One thing that I think that I don't want to speak for anyone else on the committee or on council. The 25% risk is kind of it's just kind of 25%. What does that really mean? Like, I guess, and I'm not sure who would answer this, but like worst case scenario, like what could fall under that 25% risk? Like, what are we looking at as, potential issues that we could encounter?
I would start with mainly what you would be looking at would be administrative costs of the JED itself. The JED has the ability to generate income tax. I think important questions are what you just asked about how soon are the jobs coming, when do we think it will start generating income tax. Obviously there will need to be some administrative expenses in the beginning as you're getting it up and running. Those are the type of things that you would be looking at. JEDs do have the power to issue bonds and things like that. My understanding is that is not what's anticipated here at all with the plan of this JED. So it's not like there's going to be a debt issued to build infrastructure. My understanding is that it's the developer that's covering all of the infrastructure costs, and the JED would not be covering those costs. So what you would be looking at is if the township and everyone's using the administrative costs, if the JED has to hire a lawyer, something like that, and there aren't the funds in the JED to pay that, then those expenses would be borne 75% by the township, 25% by the city, with the ability to be reimbursed when the income tax does come. So that would be probably the most common, would be administrative costs in the early stages.
In general, and if you can answer this, as the mayor had mentioned, there are JEDs have been approved by the state since 1993. And I did a little bit of research, and I was looking at different JEDs throughout the state. What are most of them advantageous for both the city and the townships that are involved, or what in general? How do JEDs do in general?
It's a great question. I think it's good to start with why they started. It was Mayor Pasqualik of Akron was one of the main leaders in getting JEDs up and running. And what would happen is, in a situation like what we're talking about here, we have a development, somebody wants to develop some land in a township, they need utilities, they need resources, then what would happen is you'd end up getting into an annexation battle between the city and the township, which would end up killing the development. And so the idea was, how do we, not to use a cliche, but how do we make lemonade out of lemons? Like, we've got a development that could happen, how could we find a way to make it in the city and the township's interest to work together? So the benefit that the township brings is they've got land that somebody wants to develop, create jobs, infrastructure, all of that. The city has income taxing power, which the township doesn't have. So then by the city being able to come and say, look, we aren't gonna annex you so you can continue to get your property tax dollars, but we wanna get the benefit of income tax. So what happens is that's what creates these discussions. So it kind of went, the purpose of the JED at its most basic level is to move people away from annexation fights to more of a mutually agreeable joint economic development district that kind of creates new money by having an income tax where you otherwise wouldn't have the ability to have an income tax through the JED. And then the contract and all of that's for the purpose of allocating it. I would say JEDs in general, I would say have worked well. I would say that, from a government perspective, they're generating more revenue, right? Because you're now imposing an income tax where you couldn't before, and the township's still receiving their property tax. So I would say as a general rule, and my familiarity with a few JEDs, they've tended to work better than not.
Thank you. And Mayor, you had also mentioned the wastewater treatment plant. Mr. Blum, do you have anything to add to that? That was a question that I had, but you kind of answered that in general, that regardless of the JED, things really aren't gonna change from your perspective, correct?
Correct, yes. So we are obligated to take the area that's designated to us north of the railroad tracks. The only difference here is that you're talking about townhomes, but the amount of wastewater from a townhome that may have 4 units in it versus a house, which has a probably equivalent footprint, is not that significant. And our engineers, or the engineers for the development, are required to assess the sewer capacity before our development goes in anyway. So we're gonna make sure that the incoming sewer can accept that flow. And for dry weather flow, generally, it's not a concern.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I add, this development is south of the tracks, so I think all of this, the wastewater goes to the sewer district via Cuyahoga County sanitary sewers. So you guys shouldn't receive any additional flow.
Good job, Brian.
Great job.
No problem, no worries.
Thank you very much.
I'll sign off on it.
All right.
Yeah, so the areas south of the railroad tracks go to Regional Sewer District. That is set by NOACO, or the Northeast Ohio Regional Planning Authority. And flows north of the railroad track come to us. So if they do extend townhomes to the other side of the railroad track, then that flow would of course come to us. If everything stays south, near the intersection of Bagley and Stearns, that flow's going off to regional.
Thank you very much. Director Radiff, do you anticipate, what burden do you anticipate on the finance department staff? Do you anticipate any major issues from your perspective?
Chair, so from the startup, there's obviously going to be like getting things rolling with Rita and stuff. So there's going to be some time that I'm going to be putting into this. Like once it's up and going, assuming the economic development department currently manages some of those smaller entities and then hands off to finance afterwards, where we do have to submit the financial statements and the audit. But given the size and amount of transactions, I can't see an abundance amount of hours. Like if assuming we're gonna net 40,000, 43 or whatever the total between the two, I wouldn't anticipate our costs being higher than that. A lot of it's assumption until we see, how everything plays out. But I don't personally feel there'd be a large burden after setup.
And then really one of the last questions I have, I had read about the board for the JED, but could you maybe just give a little more information about how that will function as a separate entity, or just give a little more basic information about that, please?
Sure, yeah, and township's welcome to jump in as well. statute establishes a way to structure a board with a representative from the township, a representative from the city, and then if there's businesses and residents, there's like a representative for the businesses and the employees, and then those board members then select an additional board member, and then that establishes the board. The board is the governing body of the JED. So like if the JED's gonna implement an income tax, which in this case it would, the board of the JED has to approve that. They tend to meet annually. They could meet more, they have to meet annually. They would be the ones that would make, they have to approve a budget every year. They're not a city council, they're not township trustees, but a little bit of that similar role for the purposes of the JED. That's their main role. It's normally, practically speaking, usually you have it city officials or township officials that are the reps that are on the board so that they're, sometimes you might have your finance director or somebody like that that make up the boards.
All right, thank you. Any questions from committee? Yes.
Yeah, just a couple questions. So first off, there's the note that the board member from North Olmsted side's appointed by the mayor. Does that go through council approval of who that trustee is or who that member of the board is? It doesn't say in the agreement that needs to be approved by council.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
It just notes that the city member shall be the mayor or a designee who is appointed by the mayor. There's no reference in here that council would be engaged in an approval of that. There's nothing in our current code that deals with this particular situation. I don't know, Russ, if you know whether there's anything in the state code that would require a council approval. It doesn't, probably not.
No, I think the council's approval of the agreement
Right.
would be the approval.
Okay, so we control the agreement, we don't approve anybody on the board. Council doesn't have any say on who's on the board of the JED. It's all,
Could you change the agreement to put that the city council's mayor's and nominee is approved by the city council, perhaps?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, yeah.
I need a better understanding of the annex section 12. I'm not really understanding why all of this component. Let me just read it so I can understand again. I'm not a lawyer. The city agrees not to engage in any annexation pursuant to ORC Chapter 709 of any real property in the township unless the township trustees agree to the annexation. The city and township agree to extend this prohibition beyond the term agreed in Section 6, so beyond the 25 plus the extension, so essentially in perpetuity. And said prohibition shall continue until waived by the township trustees. So again, it's all on the township to determine whether annexation agreement is there. The city further agrees to assist in the defense of any attempt of annexation by another municipality of any property in the township to include the district. So the way I read this is the whole township now, we have to provide legal support and defense of anybody else who tries to annex that. The costs associated with this defense of the district shall be paid from the district income taxes revenue. So if I understood this right, the district would support any legal defense for all of Olmsted Township of any kind of annexation threat that happens. So, and can you clarify that? Because to me, this sounds like we're signing up for a lot of stuff outside of the district, of the JED district, that we'd be on the hook to have either potentially administrative expenses, as well as vacating, current ORC Chapter 709 authority for the rest of the township. Am I reading that right, or is that wrong?
Parts of it, but a part is not correct.
Okay.
The revised code specifically does require that the agreement provides the city cannot annex any property within the district. This agreement, and this is something that is a business point that's negotiated between a township and a city, can go further, and in this agreement it does, to limit the city's ability to annex outside of the district. The city's obligation to protect or to oppose annexation by another community does not apply to the entire township, just the district. And that's where it says the city further agrees to assist in the defense of any attempt of annexation by another annexation of the district. Any annexation defense of the district shall be, oh, sorry, I'm down the line.
But that's not what it says. It says the city,
Township to include the district.
the city further agrees to assist in defense of any attempt of annexation by another municipality of any property in the township.
To include the district.
Right. So any property in the
That
township.
includes the district.
No, it says to include the district.
Right.
Not
I mean, I'll
dedicated
ask
to
the
district.
townships
That's the intention, that's what we negotiated. That's
to,
correct.
include.
To the district.
Just to the district.
Okay, well, that needs to be reworded, because it says in the township to include the district, not in the district.
Maybe which includes the district, any property in the township which includes the district.
I mean, it sounds semantic, but it's a big deal.
No, I understand, no, I agree with you, that's an important point.
Okay, so, so just to be clear then, from our defense of annexation, that relates to just the district, but we feel that, the administration feels that the $50,000 of revenue is worth the value of abdicating, or, all other annexation ability, or you're yielding that to the township for the rest of the township, for this parcel of a district. That was, I'd like to know, I guess what I'd like to know, Mr. Chair, is like, when we bought the forest properties, right? Our economic development director laid out, there was a value proposition in getting first rights of purchasing the other school properties, right? And there was an economic value there. I'm just curious, like, to me, that sounds like there's economic value here, and I don't know what that would be, but it seems like it would be along a similar lines of getting the right of first refusal on something. This isn't first refusal, right? But we're basically abdicating a right then that we wouldn't buy something unless you sell it to us. And I'm not saying that we're gonna annex or anything, right? But like, and not only that, it's not even just during the part of the agreement, it's in perpetuity. So like, we're signing up for a 50-year term on a district, and then we're abdicating as a council additional authority for perpetuity across the whole township, not just the district that's in place. So I had some concerns about this section. I think you've clarified it, so I appreciate that. I'll open it up to anybody else. I may have a couple other questions, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me later.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll direct it to Law Director at the moment, and whichever of you want to respond to it. I guess my question is, how did this contract come about? Like, was there input from North Olmsted and the township to construct this?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding in this process was that Director Upton was working with Attorney Balthus to review these documents. That was my understanding. I've come to conclude that my understanding may not be accurate. And Attorney Balthus can perhaps explain your role in the process, because that's why we have the expertise that we have from Attorney Balthus. And perhaps it's an excellent question, but no, it was not negotiated by my office. And Attorney Balthus, you can perhaps explain your role.
Yeah, we received the agreement probably a long time ago, and I shouldn't say a long time ago, 6-8 months ago, reviewed it when I've switched firms in the middle, so it's a little bit complicated. But we reviewed it at Squire, provided comments, and then most of the negotiation was between, I think, Max and the township's attorney. We were kept in the loop. Max would call me with questions, and we would talk about it and talk about the history of annexation and things like that, and provide comments. But most of the direct communication with the township and the business terms, as is often the case, were dealt with by the Economic Development Department.
So that leads me to think that,
No,
that Director Upton was satisfied with the terms that are presented to us.
That was my understanding, yeah.
And I guess if I could just turn my attention to the township. Sure. Are you already in other JEDs with other communities, or is this an initial JED?
Olmsted Township currently has a JED with Olmsted Falls on Cook Road. There's about 280 acres south of Cook Road. It's not developed land at this point, but it is a functioning JED.
Can I ask, are the terms similar to?
They're very similar to this contract, yes. I think there's actually some more commitments from Olmsted Falls in terms of the utilities and things of that nature. But again, development hasn't come forward yet. We're still working through that process. The township doesn't own any of the land, so it's been a little bit of struggle with the property owners there. But we've had some interest.
And did I also understand that this has already been voted on by the township trustees?
That's correct.
So is there a desired timeline that you're looking to?
Well, as the chairman asked earlier, these developments are getting ready for shovels in the ground. So I would anticipate, Aldi being open probably the start of next year. Likewise, the other ones shortly thereafter. So yes, timing is kind of the essence, but I also want the members of council to feel comfortable with the agreement. So if there's something that is a sticking point, I'm sure we can reevaluate. But yeah, I think timing is important.
I will defer to Councilman Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so a couple things were kind of answered, but according to who negotiated this, it was our ex-economic development director and the township. As Councilman Madden, I think you want to know, you asked, but the JED with the Olmsted Falls is a 50-50 deal, 20 years. The gentleman said they haven't developed that land yet. It's owned by an individual family that hasn't wanted to do anything. My problem is, why, with us having all the leverage, did we settle for 25% when the Falls had 50-50? They need us, the township. I believe we should have had the 75% and them 25% because they're keeping all the property tax too. That's a big problem for me. I just don't see that in our favor. The other thing was, I did go to the public hearings. I did listen to the residents. They weren't happy with this whole situation in the township. They've come here and expressed their displeasure with it too. But they just feel like they don't want a tax on this island portion of the property. And they're afraid that's going to grow more and more, and townships are known for not paying city income tax. Two more points I'd like to make. Since this construction's pretty much begun over there, you're moving forward without the income tax dollars. If we decide to enter this agreement, we're already missing out on all the income tax dollars from the construction workers, and that's could be quite a bit of money. So I'm not sure why this wasn't brought earlier before the construction started so we could get those workers to pay the city income tax. And my last point going to be, Mr. Chair, if I could, on January 15th, 2026, the trustees appointed Trustee Perez to the JED board commencing for January 2026 through the end of 2028.
and I'm gonna ask this to Mr. Feltus. How did, somebody get appointed to, the JED when there's not even a JED board yet established?
Well, I think they authorized the appointment. They're not appointed because the JED board
You
doesn't.
could clarify that, Councilman. That was for the Olmsted Falls JED. That was not for the North Olmsted JED. Lisa Zvir, our former trustee, she is no longer a trustee. She was the chair of the board. So the board appointed trustee Perez as the chair of that board.
So, okay, because it doesn't say Olmsted Falls in your resolution there. That's, I'm just reading it off the back of your,
But it would be the Olmsted Falls Board, sir.
okay. Is that in name then? There's a name that you could see that it was the Olmsted Falls, Jeff?
Sure. Yeah, we can get you a copy of that resolution.
I have the resolution here, it just doesn't say Olmsted Falls.
You have the agenda, not the
Oh,
actual
that's the agenda.
resolution.
Yeah, that's the agenda, sir.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right at this time, thank you.
All right, any other questions from council? Yes.
If you already have an agreement with Olmsted Falls, why didn't you go back to them for this one?
You know, the Olmsted Falls JED has been slow developing. There's a little bit of history with it. I won't get into the details here, but we just saw this as an opportunity to partner with a good municipality, North Olmsted. As the mayor mentioned, we've been good partners. We thought it was a win-win for everybody. Trustee Perez, you want to say anything?
Absolutely. Piggybacking on the mayor's comments, when you all succeed, we tend to succeed. When we succeed, you all succeed. I know I personally do a majority of my shopping here in North Olmsted. I know our residents do as well. When pertaining to this JED itself and our residents, I know a vast majority of our residents are in support of this JED once they get the full information as far as taxation, income tax, and things of that kind of nature. Yes, there is an impression that some residents believe that we bring this JED on with North Olmsted, the entire township will be paying income tax, which is simply not true. And that's on our part to continue to educate our residents about JEDs itself.
Thank you.
Yes.
So my point being where I feel that we're not getting a good enough deal at 25%, is it possible to get at least 50-50 like the Falls had with you, knowing that maybe this will move a lot faster than what you've had with the Falls? I just think that 25% for what we have to do and the liability just doesn't sit well with me. 50-50, I don't know, is that possible, or is this a done deal the way it is?
I think the township needs to answer it.
Yeah, I mean, we can't answer that right now. You know, this isn't,
Because you've already passed it.
well, the Board of Trustees is a three-member board.
Yeah, and they've already passed this.
I will say, Councilman, you know, Olmsted Falls was on the hook for some of those capital improvements that have not been made. I don't have that dollar amount, what that cost would be. But just keep that in mind when you're talking about the agreements. There's some more that you see than just the 50-50. That was a 50-year JED.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, to the councilman's question about why the negotiated number went from 50% to 25%, when we had a meeting almost 2 years ago with the former finance director regarding this agreement. She was very concerned about us doing a 50%, was not in favor of the city being on the hook for 50%. So we lowered it to 25% per her council. The councilman Glassburn and the township, then we went in and negotiated that way.
Then does that, based on what you're saying then, if it was to be increased to 50%, that means that we would then be on the lines for 50% of the risk as well?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
So it is not a,
Well,
just
it doesn't have to be though. You could be 50-50 with just lowering us to be 25%. You can do anything you want in a contract. I'm not saying they would do that, but it doesn't have to be.
That's not how it, I mean, you're correct
you
that
tell me-
anything can be agreed to.
If the JED doesn't allow that, then what you make has to be your liability issue too?
I don't think that's a strict statutory requirement. I would say that it is though probably the most common way that they tend to be structured. It's, I'll say the market or the norm, but I'm not aware of a
That's fair.
statutory requirement that requires it.
Okay, any other, yes?
Can we talk about the risk again? I don't understand the risk. What risk are we talking about?
It would be the unfunded obligations of the JED board, so the board itself. Sometimes with these JED agreements, you can have a lot more obligations around infrastructure. I've not reviewed the Olmsted Falls ones, but it sounds like that has some things like that, where a city is, obligating itself to run utilities or to do certain things with the hope of money coming back. That is not what this agreement is contemplating. So the risks that you would really be looking at would be, as the finance director noted, you do have some initial startup costs, things like that, which those the city would actually pay 100% of those, but then get reimbursed at 100% for those costs. So really you're just looking at if the JED spends more money than it has coming in, which it will in the very beginning, just for these little administrative things, then the city would be on the hook for that 25%. I would note that you have representation on the JED board. The JED doesn't really have any reason to be spending money that it doesn't have coming in. So, I try to stay away from saying this risk is high, this risk is low, but just tell you what it is and you can decide whether it's high or low. But generally speaking, you're just looking at administrative costs. And the way it's currently structured with the 75-25, the city would have a say, and then the other board member from the township, they would be bearing 75% of that risk. So you've got a board that shouldn't be inclined to be spending more money than they have, if that makes sense. I don't know if the township has any other risks that they want to mention, or maybe specific examples from Olmsted Falls that they've seen that they think they should.
No, I mean, I think you outlined the risk kind of perfectly, yeah.
I will note, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I thought our finance department was gonna take care of the paperwork. Isn't that right? Isn't that what he just said a minute ago?
Yes.
So if we're doing that, what's the risk? I don't understand.
Just, you might get costs from Rita.
Yeah, so, I haven't spoken to Rita to say if there's like a setup fee or anything like that, but that's the type of stuff they usually net out of the tax that gets released back to us. So like hard costs, no. There's like the soft cost of the amount of time we put into it, sure, but it's not necessarily additional money leaving our pocket. To what extent that part gets reimbursed, I'm not super sure, but once we're set up, I wouldn't imagine that, that's just based on what they said, assuming they're not gonna go do bonds or anything like that, I wouldn't imagine we have a bunch of administrative costs like boiling up by any means. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Belfast, the board's gonna consist of 5 members, correct, eventually?
Mhm.
One from the city, one from the township. Those other 3 board members can have a majority rule over the city and the trustee, correct?
The city selects the one though. The business rep is selected by the city. I'm sorry, I think the business rep is selected by the township. The employee rep is selected by the city, and then that board is who selects the other.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, our city appointee potentially is gonna get outvoted on anything that they don't like for the city.
It is possible, but somebody who they approve the appointment of the board would have to be on the other side for that to happen. But no, you are absolutely right. I mean, there is a chance that the city representative could lose a vote for one on the board. That is possible.
One more question. So with those representatives, we kind of question on how they get appointed. How would any of them get removed from the board? Or what would their terms be of how long they're a board member and things like that?
2 years. off the top of my head.
So the employee rep would be by the appointee, and they would determine whether they extend that term or not. And then for the city's representative would be by the mayor to extend that term. And as of now, there's no clarification. Council's involved in that. And then how would, the board itself could potentially remove a member for like misconduct or something like that, or how would that happen?
You have 4-year term.
It says it's set by the Ohio Revised Code, section 715-72.
Page 5, top paragraph.
4-year term. That's what that reads.
Until their respective successors are elected or appointed.
Okay, Representative Glassburn.
Thank you. I just wanted to address a couple of things. This project started as a series of conversations between then trustee President Alton and myself when I was still on council. This was one of the last things I worked on before leaving the body. Again, the goal of this was just to create a win-win scenario that cities have a unique set of privileges under state law and townships have a unique set of privileges, and there was a potential match here. As has been stated, the Olmsted Falls one hasn't come together, and quite frankly, that is, when you're discussing the risk, that is the primary risk is that the development doesn't happen. That the city spends $10,000 or $15,000 in your time tonight and Director Radif's time putting this together, and then the project falls apart for some reason. But there's no enduring obligation unless there is a much more elaborate scheme put together to issue debt. No bank, no loan is going to issue debt without a payment structure. So the risk, I think Councilman Limpert diagnosed, is do you want to have a long-term business relationship with Olmsted Township where the city of North Olmsted has an interest in their success and vice versa, as opposed to a more adversarial relationship of the city periodically coming in and trying to annex land. That's what the payoff of the income tax is for, to disincentivize the city from coming in and annexing to make these kinds of projects possible. So I hope that gives a little bit of color as to what this is, why it came about.
Russ, could you explain, for the benefit of the board here, they've dealt with TIFs in the past where funds generated through the TIF can be, through the payments in lieu of taxes, can be used to benefit the district or benefit the parcel. What is the proper expenditure for funds that are generated through the JED? What is the scope, if there is any limitation?
The first thing will be pay expenses of the JED. That'll be a contractual obligation, so that'll be first. Then once it gets through that, it's just a transfer to the city's general fund to be used as the city would like to use any other funds.
So it's not necessarily.
There's no restrictions. It starts restricted until the JED expenses are paid, but once those are paid, it's released. The city's share is released to the city for their.
The same way our share and the township share.
Exactly.
Another question is the infrastructure within this proposed JED. Are there dedicated streets? Is this all privately owned? So such that if there's future maintenance and improvements, maintenance is more about it. If there's maintenance requirements for, take your pick, typical infrastructure maintenance, where is the responsibility to pay for that?
That's a great question. So the roads themselves are all private. The sanitary sewer is public, and the water is public.
So the township would have the responsibility to deal with the sewer lines or what have you. There might be some, it's gonna be a long time, but one never knows. It's not a JED function, it's just a township function.
It's a township function, correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Belfus, you said the administrative costs structured, it's set, this and that. There's any indication of what that will be before then we would see the net of fees coming to the city? Traditionally, do you know the administrative costs up front?
It's a good question.
I just wanna know what we could possibly clear after that amount.
No, it's a very good question. Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers, I apologize. I think the biggest one I would think about is what the finance director noted, is that there would be, it's not that REIT is gonna ask you for a check, but they might reduce their distribution to you for certain fees for setting it up. The agreement does provide that that's one of the first things that the JED money repays. So we would get those funds back. Yeah, I think, the former councilman, did highlight probably the highest risk that I should have pointed out at the beginning, is that if the development doesn't happen and if the TIF, or the income tax money is never earned to then be paid, any money that you've spent up to this date on this, all of this time and energy, that's lost. But again, I think that is very limited as you go forward, because if at some point it becomes clear the development's not gonna happen, obviously you wouldn't spend any more resources on the JED and it would stop.
Mr. Chair, I go more. Yeah, please. So to date, for your services, are they completed now, or you're still under contract for us to pay more for this? Do you have more work to do on this?
I would say that would probably depend on whether there are going to be more amendments or discussions on this agreement based on today's meeting. I don't know.
I think, Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, I would like to kind of come back to Russ, him and I, to have another conversation, another look at this, because as I said, he mentioned earlier, it's been 8 months since he's looked at this, and then there was negotiations that took place, and then this document appeared. The law department was not engaged to deal with that. My understanding, as I said earlier, is that Mr. Baltus was doing that, and that was not the case. So I think for our benefit, that the two lawyers here would like to just take another review of that document to make sure we're all on the same page. You've already identified one issue, which you Mr. Limpert did, that may be a concern. It could be something that could be further discussed. There may be others that might need some clarification. I just think it's prudent. And it's a little unusual here because, again, I was under the impression that Mr. Baltus was being actively engaged in the negotiation process, and what I'm hearing from him, that's not really the case. So
I was not on a daily.
You're never on a daily, but monthly,
you wouldn't want me to be on a daily. Just
monthly or quarterly basis or semi-annual basis is a different issue. I want our collective eyes to go over that one more time to make sure that it's satisfactory. And again, I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just think that my understanding of how this is working is that Director Upton was negotiating it, and then what was given to us is what you have. And it would benefit just to make sure that one last look by law would be, by legal, him and I would be highly advisable.
I was just gonna add, as you guys were talking about administrative costs, just so you know how RITA works a little bit, RITA withholds 3% of the gross that it collects, and then they use that to net against any collection costs. Generally, they withhold 3% from the city. It only takes them about 1.19% in cost of the gross to collect, and then they pay us back the rest. Now, at this small of a scale, it could be closer to the 3%. But if you're looking for when everything's moving normally, barring anything abnormal coming up, you're looking at 3% off the top from RITA, I would say.
Yeah, just one closing comment. It's really important for us as a council and finance to understand when there's a revenue side and there's a risk and expense side, and we were very clear getting the revenue side of this, which I think is great. I think a lot of the risk and expense part of a joint venture wasn't clearly we're getting the picture now. So I think getting that full picture will really help us make get comfortable with this as a council, or at least I will. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, that will help me understand a lot better than just what the revenue picture is. So, thank you.
Yes.
Just going back again to the JED board, are those appointments, are they like a volunteer kind of appointment, or are they paid appointments? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Then I do think we've gotten a lot of good information tonight, but I do think we've also had some new questions that have popped up. And there are some things that we probably would like to have those answers to before we vote. So I'm going to make a motion to hold this in committee and ask for a second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. Oh, the meeting concludes at 8:01 PM. Yeah, and it 3-0 to hold in committee. Still learning, thank you.
There was a lot going on.